Hello and welcome to the Christian Fantasy and Sci-Fi Podcast, where we talk about anything and everything fantasy and science fiction. Your host is Matt Crosswhite, and the subject matter expert is Josiah Marshall. And here we go.
Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Christian Fantasy and Sci-Fi Podcast. I'm the host, Matt Crosswhite, and subject matter expert is Josiah Marshall. Josiah, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Having some rough nights sleeping, but you know what? I'm doing well.
All right. Well, maybe you can tell us as we continue our adventure on Christian Fantasy and Sci-Fi resources. What movies do you turn on in the night when you can't watch? Or when you can't sleep?
Man.
When you can't watch? When you can't sleep is what I meant to say.
You know what? I'm actually going to take that question and I'm going to take it literally because that changes the question from what our topic is today, the top 3 movies. Because there's different movies I watch in the middle of the night when I'm trying to go to sleep. Because when I'm trying to go to sleep, I want something a little more relaxed, a little more lighthearted, perhaps, and
Sure.
And not so serious. And when it comes to, let's see here, when it comes to that, and it's always not movies, because I found that if I watch a movie, it keeps me up. I want to watch the whole thing. So I'll either drift towards Frasier as one of my number ones, The Andy Griffith Show, or Perfect Strangers from the late 80s into the 90s. An old show, an old sitcom that I really enjoyed watching. And let's see, it was Balky Bartokmus and cousin Larry Appleton. That's how Balky would call his cousin.
All right.
On the occasion, though, that I might actually watch a movie, such as, such as the other night. Some people, it's going to be different for everybody, but I actually watched Aquaman.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I am not, okay. So I will say this for the record now, so that I can get this disappointment for any listeners out of the way, or even for you.
Dear. Here we go.
I am not a big DC fan. I am not a big Marvel fan either. I did not grow up reading comic books. I did not grow up knowing these stories. I knew of Spider-Man. I knew of Superman. I knew of Batman, but that was pretty much it. I wasn't really introduced to that a whole lot. I was more of the early morning or Saturday morning cartoon kid. Dennis the Menace, Tailspin, those shows. And
that's why you're more
Duck, Gargoyles.
Yep. That's why you're more of a wholesome gentleman than the rest of us.
Oh, I don't know, but it's definitely what I had. And so when it comes to the Marvel, I will say this. In some cases, I'd say in a lot of cases, the Marvel movies, okay, I'm definitely going to alien people here. The Marvel movies tend to have a better storyline. They tend to have better direction. They tend to be a more cohesive story, especially when it includes soundtrack, than DC movies do.
Okay.
I watched Black Adam this past weekend. I'd never seen it. And my response to myself was, I have so little context for this because this movie is not making any sense to me whatsoever. And the way they were telling the story, there was no character development. There was no that character interrelationship. So next thing you know, you got these two actors looking at each other going, I'm watching you. We're going to have a serious talk. It's like, do they have this relationship? I don't know. But anyways, and then and I thought that the soundtrack, they were trying too hard, in my opinion. But you know what? It is what it is. Everybody's got their own opinion. That's just where I sit with DC and Marvel. I actually have told my son, he comes to me sometimes and says, Dad, I really want to see this Marvel movie. Can we watch it? Can we watch it? It's like, breathe. Yes, we can watch the Marvel movie. Dad, I notice you really take a little bit of time to answer that question. What's up? Joel, I have watched so many Marvel movies. I am worn out.
Mm.
I haven't even seen, let's see, I don't know how many shows there are now. I don't think I've seen any of those shows at all. Yeah, I haven't seen any of them. And I don't think I've seen the last few movies that they made. So,
Yeah.
story-wise, I guess I'm very far behind. But anyways, when I can't sleep at night, I usually try to go to something a little lighthearted. But
That makes
that's
sense.
not to say that I haven't had the marathon where I just
Sure.
in the middle of the night, I stay up all night, enjoy a marathon. Oh, that can be fun. But I remember trying to do that one time with some friends with the Harry Potter movies, and we were getting ready to go see number 7. That was painful. Not in the sense that I didn't like the movies. It was the sense of we've got to watch 6 movies. 6 movies before we go see number 7. I was like, I'm going to get there around movie 4.
And so you must have been going to see movie 7.
Yeah, part 1.
Part 1. Yeah. Really, that's got to be split up between 2 nights. 3 movies a night, 2 nights in a row.
Oh, it does. But they let's see. I think we started. Everybody slept in. Started around 10 a.m. one morning, and let's see, what are those? 2 hours each. Yeah, we got done very early, kind of maybe around 6 or 7 o'clock the next morning.
See, that didn't even sound fun.
Yeah.
My back is getting stiff just thinking about sitting there that long. That's
Yep. No, I hear you. I hear you. So and then I've also done the Lord of the Rings marathon overnight, and
Sure.
You kind of have
3 very long movies, but that's still only 3 movies.
Right. But when you watch the extended version, it gets a little longer.
Oh,
when
sure.
you try to use some of the special features, just a few, it gets even longer. So that is my experience with overnight watching.
Understood.
Although, you know what, I'm going to add something that I think is just fun. When I was growing up, when you get to be 10, 11 years old, you want to feel like an adult. You want to feel like a big boy, right? And so I always thought it was such a big deal that my mother and my dad would allow me to stay up until 10 o'clock to watch Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Proud moments.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. And so that was a big deal for me.
Yep. All right. Well, now back to our previously scheduled programming. You've got some movies selected for us that in this episode we're going to talk about your top 3 Christian fantasy movies, and then next episode we'll do top 3 Christian sci-fi movies. So what you got on the top of the chart for Christian fantasy?
Oh boy. Okay, you're using Christian fantasy. I can't say I have actually seen, well, because I had a different list. But if we want to do Christian fantasy list, then I would do this. I would say the original BBC Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
Okay.
I would say, oh man, now I've got to think a second.
What list did you have?
Pilgrims
prepared?
Progress. Pilgrims Progress.
Okay, which edition?
Oh,
I really enjoyed the animated one that came out just a few years ago, but for the sake of the length of movie, they had to cut out quite a lot of the scenes. The scenes they included, they did very well with, but but they had to cut out too much.
I would have to go back to the old 1970s live action that Liam Neeson was in that I mentioned in our first episode. There are movies that go on before that. There are even old silent film movies. I don't think I mentioned that.
Really?
Yeah. So there has been so much made regarding that story, but that would be that was the one I was introduced to when I was a kid. Was that Liam Neeson one? And so when I see and think Pilgrims Progress, I see and think that movie a lot.
Gotcha.
But then I've read the book so many times. Even when I see the movie, I get the pictures that I have in my head of the story intermixed so much. So I know, okay, that scene's not actually in the movie, but I could see how it could be translated into the movie. And so that's how it interplays a little bit.
That's hilarious.
Let's see here. So that was 2.
You've got the Josiah's cut of the movie in your head.
I do indeed. I think it's a blast. I don't know. I'm guessing I must have said this before because even my son said, "Well, Dad, you've said something like this." I was like, "Okay, I don't quite remember saying it this way," but my son has looked at me and says, "Dad, I like reading." Yeah, why is that? Because then I get to see. I get to see it in my head the way I see it.
Yes.
Because he differentiated it from I like being able to read the book rather than watch the movie. And he says, I don't even mind. He even enjoys doing the radio dramas of some stories because he says, I still get to see things in my own head.
Yep. You get to build out the set.
Yep.
Build the set, place the characters.
Exactly. So, that one's got my own splicing and extended stuff.
That's fantastic.
Which is interesting because just as a little side note, just recently I was my kids are really into Kenneth Graham. Kenneth Graham wrote Wind in the Willows, and they did an old claymation movie of Wind in the Willows back in 1983, and it's a very popular one. It was it was done in England, and someone. Now, they just time and everything. They didn't include a couple of chapters because they actually went it by chapter out of the book. And so there were a few chapters missing. Well, somebody took the time to go into the other productions that they did of Wind in the Willows, and they spliced in the missing chapters to the original movie. It's like, and it's on YouTube. It's like, wow, okay, that's pretty cool. But so yeah, that's just one of those random things going, yeah, you know what? It'd be kind of fascinating to see how you could splice in your own stuff. But if there was another Christian fantasy. See, there's not a whole lot that's been made as far as Christian fantasy. I mean, I as a kid I could say, oh, Bible Man. But no. I'm not going to say that, especially since it was a TV show. Even the live action was a little whoa. I'm going to have to give that one a little more thought because I cannot think of any off the top of my head. Aside from saying another Chronicles of Narnia movie. Although I would say that if I was to compare, if I was to go with another Narnia movie, then I would go with, I'd go with The Silver Chair, BBC. I'd go back to BBC again. I appreciate what they've done recently. They have not done a more recent movie of any of the others. Now, there's reasons for that, and I don't know if I need to go into all of that, but suffice it to say, Netflix is the first company ever to actually own all the movie rights to all of the books.
Oh wow!
But there is something to be said for the BBC productions. It captures the magic of the story, and it does it in a tone that doesn't cheapen it, that doesn't make it even look silly. They did it in a way that you go, there's something that's magnificent about this. And I like using that word because when I look at that, when I watch any of them, I just think this is magnificent. And they did these movies decades ago. And that's weird to say. Decades ago. They did them back, let's see, that would have been the 1980s. Yeah, I think that was it. So I have a great affinity for those older BBC. Now, not to say I don't enjoy the new stuff. As I said in a previous episode, Will Poulter, who plays the Eustace on the new one, he plays Eustace Clarence Scrubb on Voyage of the Dawn Treader. I think he did a phenomenal job. But yeah, that would be my next go-to. If I was, rather than just trying to rack my brain, it would be The Silver Chair from BBC's production. So that would be my next one. But on another list, if I was to say what was my top 3 fantasy movies that have impacted me over the years. Now, here's the funny thing. We think fantasy, and especially even in this context of this podcast, and we sort of automatically think of, medieval times, probably you got a king or something. You've got maybe some dragons or some, mythical creatures. But I've actually, and I even told my wife, I think you're going to laugh at this. And she thought, okay, that is funny. The list I gave her, because I read her my list, and she goes, why? What are these? So my first one is going to be Groundhog Day.
Wait, what?
Exactly. Okay.
All right.
So when we think about fantasy, we think about something that's out of our world, right? Now, you've got something fiction, but when you got fiction, you still have it in our world. Our world's rules, our world's properties and principles still apply. Okay, that's why you've got Sense and Sensibility from ages ago. You've got other books that are categorized as fiction, but yet they fall within our own context and our own reality, right? Now, while there are elements of Groundhog Day that would fit within the fiction realm, in my opinion. In my opinion, also, it also fits perfectly well into fantasy. Because the idea of having the same day repeat itself, the idea of the person being able to kill themselves and still be able to come back to life the next day and relive the whole day, that is pure and utter fantasy. I don't care how you cut it.
I can see that.
Yeah, so that's fantasy. And so the reason that's at the top of my list is because that movie, if there were 3 words that describe that movie for me, it was happiness and meaning. That guy was so disgruntled and you knew he was not happy at the beginning of the movie. And even through most of the movie, he didn't want the day, but yet he ended up finding meaning in his day, going and saving the kid falling out of the tree. It's been long enough. I'm sure maybe there's one person out there that hasn't seen it, but it's been long enough. I'm going to just spoil him running and catching the kid falling out of the tree because he knew he had to be there at a certain time, and yelling at the kid, "You've never thanked me." And then you've got the car of the old ladies, and they're sitting there with a flat tire, and next thing you know, the car's shaking up and down, and he's got a jack out there. It's okay, ladies. I happen to have the jack. I happen to have a tire. So you just sit back and enjoy yourself. And then one lady, I don't know if anyone's ever noticed it, but one of the ladies actually said, maybe he's part of the Rotary Club.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. And then, of course, he has a lot of other antics that I think are just hysterical. But
right.
But really, I that's what I took away from it, because it just spoke to me in volumes at a time in my life where I wasn't happy and I didn't have much. I didn't feel like I had any meaning. So that's my top pick.
Very nice. Very nice.
I mean, your reaction was just...
You definitely got me. I was not because until you gave the explanation as to why, I would have just put that in the category of fiction, and I wouldn't have even thought of it as fantasy. But you're right; those elements of being able to die and then come back and redoing the same day over and over. That is fanciful.
There you go.
Certainly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Easy for me to slay. All right, so what's number 2 on your list, sir?
All right, you ready to be thrown again?
I'm sitting down and bracing myself. Go ahead.
Bruce Almighty.
Oh yeah, okay. I can see that one.
Okay.
That one makes more sense, especially given the previous explanation.
Yeah, okay, good. All right, good. So it's not as jarring as the first.
Right.
Oh man, that makes me feel good. I got him, folks. I got him.
I am curious to hear why you chose Bruce instead of Evan.
Oh, okay. Well, when it comes to Bruce, there were some very basic things. I call them basic, but yet they can be very poignant. It can be very personal, and they can be and in some ways they can be complex. There were some very basic things that were covered. Anyone wants the ability to control what happens to them. But more than that, it's not just control anything. It's also being able to enable themselves to be able to cause somebody to fall in love with them. Because one of the things, oh, good grief, Morgan Freeman says to Jim Carrey is you can do anything you want, but you cannot mess with free will. That's the one thing you're not allowed to do. And Jim becomes desperate for his girlfriend. Now, the thing is that if there was one thing that I don't think worked very well was that it's hard to believe that Jim Carrey is that selfish. His selfishness didn't come across all that real, to be honest with you. But given what they're trying to do with the character, it makes more sense that when he finally realizes what he's losing, that he becomes so desperate to have it back that he will go the way he did to get her back, pulling the moon in close, having a wild night together, moving clouds around so that it says what it says, take him back, or even the TV, talking to her in the diner. It's just all these random things of take Bruce back. And so what I took out of it was another simple 3-word statement, and that is, and even the first word may seem a little odd, but I think it speaks to what the object is. The magic of self-sacrifice. The magic of self-sacrifice. Because when we think of fantasy, we think of wizards, we think of all of these incredible notions of being able to perform magic. I'm going to kind of break mold here. I'm going to bring in another movie, because when we think of magic, we sometimes think of it being very clean, very effortless. You might there's nothing really raw or kind of almost strange about it. But when you see the movie Bright with Will Smith, did you ever see that movie?
I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay. It was very good. In my opinion, it was great. It was a great movie. It was worth watching. And in it, though, there's a wand that's found, and he's a police officer in LA. It's a complete blend. You've got real world mixed with fantasy world, so you even see dragons flying off in the distance, and Will Smith getting a broom to beat up the pixie that keeps infesting or doing something to his house, something like that. It's like, okay. But what they do is that they show the rawness of magic, and they talk about it from even a radioactive point of view, and just the real world reaction that the body has to this magic, and how it can easily kill somebody, and it looks dangerous, right? Because when you read Lord of the Rings, you don't really get that sometimes. Although you do get it, especially in Lord of the Rings, you get the the element of good, the element of dark, the element of light when you come to magic.
Right.
But magic isn't as clean as we kind of think, right? And so we've got these different expectations when it comes to magic. So when I say the word magic of self-sacrifice, it causes a pause. At least it did for me when I first thought of this phrase. And it goes, wait a minute, but that makes perfect sense. Because something happens that almost shouldn't happen. I can't use the word miracle. I can't use the word miracle. But what I can use is the word magic, because there is something going on here that a person is actually causing without trying to cause it. Because if there's any one trope in a lot of fantasy, is that all these magicians and wizards are having to learn, don't force it, let it happen. And yet that's what's going on here. He has to quit fighting. He has to quit fighting for this, for it to actually do what it does, and let him just be himself. Which is why I'm gonna admit that there was a second movie that was tied for second place with this.
Okay. So does that make it your third place one?
No.
Okay.
But I'm going to admit that there was a second one that I nearly put in this place, because for me growing up, Aladdin became an expression for me of kind of a placement that I felt in myself of where I was and where I wanted to be. And if there was one thing I definitely connected with Aladdin over, was that I tried to be something I wasn't. I'm not a Prince Abubu, as Jafar would say. A blah. Anyway. But there's that key line in there where the genie, all the magic aside, says two words: be yourself. And I use that inflection because he's a bee when he says it.
Because he was a bumblebee at the time. Yes.
Be yourself. So that's another element I see coming out with Bruce. Be yourself. Quit trying so hard. Let her see what she originally saw, and maybe you'll get to see a little bit of what you need to see. Because if there was another element going on at the time when I was watching Bruce Almighty just over and over again, is that I was single, I was on my own, and I was wanting someone in my life. And I remember being told one time by someone that I admired and trusted and respected, was that often the person comes along when you're not looking for them, and a relationship happens when you're not even trying. Yeah. And so I let that just kind of simmer in the back of my mind for years. And so it was ironic just how well that just spoke truth into what happened with my wife and how that worked. That's another story for another time. But anyways, that movie, Bruce Almighty, just really gave me an ability to look at my life and yet laugh at the same time, and yet still learn something from it. Because as I said before, I love it when a story connects with me, but also challenges me with questions.
Yes. If
you challenge me with questions, you've got my attention. You've got my attention in spades, which is something I'm going to bring up on our next podcast regarding a sci-fi movie on my list. So,
okay.
Yeah. So that's my number 2.
Excellent. Which makes number 3.
Cars.
All right. I'm curious.
Okay. I'm curious. How much of this list were you expecting to hear something maybe Lord of the Rings or Chronicles of Narnia or the World series or what?
I had 2 expectations for today's episode, and you have let me down significantly, but that's okay. No. I'm just kidding. I was expecting to be able to geek out with you on Lord of the Rings, and I was expecting to learn about some other traditional fantasy, like with elves, dwarves, forests, good, evil, movies that I had never heard of before. But this is a good conversation too. We can have that one another time.
Okay, this is reminding me of something, and I'm going to say it for the sake of our audience. Matt called me up one night, and he's off. I think what you were house sitting, maybe I wasn't quite sure, but the wife wasn't there, and you called me up and said, "So you said something the other day about dwarves. Can you tell me more about that?" So I start talking about dwarves a little bit, and about 3 or 5 minutes in, I said, "So what do you think?" He goes, "Oh, I'm not really wanting to interact. I'm just wanting to listen. So talk away."
Yep.
So
I basically wanted I wanted, and I very much received the Encyclopedia Britannica version of dwarves and the use of dwarves in various different types of literature, specifically fantasy. And that's honestly exactly what I was looking for that night. So you really came through for me, sir.
Well, I'm glad I just to tickle your your learning bone, but the thing that got me the most is that after I get done, I said, "Well, it's been almost an hour now, so what do you think?" He says, "Oh no, I'm good. I can go to sleep now. See ya. Bye." Click.
Well, just
what am I?
Just for clear.
What am I? You're counting sheep?
No. You had satisfied the curiosity. I had learned everything I needed to learn. It was not a yeah, tell me something super boring so I can No.
Okay.
My brain was spinning and I had questions. You answered all the questions and I could shut down the brain for the night.
Right.
Oh dear.
Oh my word. Oh, I'm always good for a good laugh, but that was great.
Okay, so moving the spotlight back to you. Tell us about Cars.
Okay. I've got another 3-word focus of the movie. I'm gonna
Yeah, does your face hurt too? Yeah.
Just take a breath. Power of relationships. You see the beginning of the movie, and if there's one thing that's I would almost use the word heavily, but I wouldn't use it in the sense that it's just overdone. But I'd use it more in the sense of that old 1980s word of, well, this is heavy. It is heavy in the sense that, wow, whoa, you see, you can understand, you can even feel what it's like for him to be so lonely.
Yes. Can I take a brief sidebar for just a second?
Sure.
In your description of the use of the word heavy in the 80s, that took me to Back to the Future. When he goes back and he's talking about, oh, that's heavy, and Doc says, "What? You keep saying heavy. Is there something wrong with the Earth's gravitational pull in the future? What? Why is everything so heavy in the future?"
Yep.
Sorry, anyway.
No, that's all right. No, that's a perfect one because that's the exact same scene and phrase that goes through my head when I think of the word too. That's what pop culture does, baby. You can't get away from it, right?
Shared experiences.
But yeah, it would be that 1980s expression of, wow, this is heavy. This is heavy. And you almost get this sense that he's so yearning for it that he's almost, you would almost think he's desperate, but then the way they have the character play it, it continues to show he's not willing to admit it, even to himself, let alone others, that when Mater does what he does, it tends to penetrate that barrier. And that is, I knew I made the right decision. Yeah, what's that? When I chose you as my best friend. And the reaction, see, this is something I got to give to those animators. They did a phenomenal job. Even John Lasseter, Doc, all of them, Pete Docter, every one of them, they did a phenomenal job on that story. I cannot. Wow, it's just, oh man, I know it's not that old, but frankly, when I saw that, I'm going, what did I just see? Wow. I'm going, this is something. I even looked at my wife and I said, this is something our kids are going to watch. They're going to watch this. And But the reaction that they had Lightning McQueen have when he said that, you knew it penetrated him, and you were expecting to cry, but you ended up crying for him. That
Right.
was the draw. They did it so well, for crying out loud. It's probably one of the most complete, and I say complete because there are stories that have plot holes. There are stories where sometimes a portion gets a little clunky, maybe, or something's not moving smoothly. But I have to say, there is something so organic to Cars, and it works so seamlessly that you'd really have to nitpick to find something wrong. Because
Absolutely.
the story, it's just the way it works and moves in and out. And it's so believable in the sense that you could see that somebody could react like this. It is realistic in the sense of how relationships work. But yet the power of those relationships is what gets me the most. And I think that for a lot of people, Cars becomes that expression, that yearning of the type of friendships they would like to have, the type of relationships they have. Because even, and I had that before, but even now after the pandemic, I think people are wanting it even more. I'm surprised that Cars isn't plastered everywhere, in the sense of people saying, this is what I want. This is the type of connection I'm wanting. This is how I want to be seen. Because Mater, he's not looking at some guy, he's going, oh, he needs my help, or I want to help him. It was just simply, I like you. Why? Lightning snuck out with him. Go tractor tipping.
Yep.
So you just find somebody that you like, you find somebody attached to, and you just grab on for all you're worth, right? And so that's my third choice, because it just speaks to the power of relationships. And when I first saw that, boom, I mean, that echoed so strongly. You'd think it'd be my number one, but no, Groundhog's up there.
Okay.
Especially since Groundhog met me on an intellectual level as well, because not only did they have him do something, not was it just a moral development, not only was it emotional development, but it was an intellectual one as well, because when he starts learning French and he does that scene where he's doing this monologue and all the newscasters go and they're recording him, and it's just, yeah, okay. He's not just doing something for the sake of doing something. He's doing it because he's made some decisions.
Right.
And I saw that in the movie to being even more powerful to how change can happen, and how that change can be even more meaningful when you understand and you've accepted it and you've gone through the process of understanding what's happened. So
absolutely,
that's my top three.
Very good. Very good.
But
as we've mentioned,
you threw me for a spin on that first question, though. Top three Christian fantasy. So I'm gonna have to start thinking are you gonna ask me that question next time? Because if so, I'm gonna have to start thinking now. What's my top three Christian sci-fi? Wow, that one's gonna be tough.
Just the C.S. Lewis space trilogy. There you go. 1, 2, and 3.
If they make it. They never made those into movies.
Oh, sure.
They've never made them into movies.
True.
But not to disappoint, Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia are still incredibly impactful in my life, and they hold a very special place, because when I wanted to save those, because when I talk about them, I want to talk about them.
Yes, well, we will definitely make that its own either episode or mini series once we finish this little series. So next episode, dear listeners, we'll hear about Josiah's top 3 picks of sci-fi personally. So that way you know what to expect as well, sir. All right, everyone. Happy listening, happy reading, happy watching. Until next time, take care.